There were in some cases some growing pains with Season 8. Some critics of the host segments, and of course a general sense that without Trace the best days were behind them now. But as time had gone on, criticism began to wane as the actors settled into their roles and the new dynamics that were in place here. Ratings on the show were also doing well, enough that there was a small Thanksgiving marathon and summer blockbuster review, them having fun with hit summer movies with the press packets that had gone out.
Charlie Sheen's dearest fantasy.
Directed by Rob Lowe.
However, ratings began to plateau, and there were changes going on behind the scenes on the Sci-Fi Channel, and it's all thanks to Nick at Night. You're in for yet another of my long string of wild behind-the-scenes corporate business shenanigans. You see, the success of Nick at Night's classic television lineup led to Viacom launching a new channel called TV Land. Well, apparently there was this clause in their agreement with MCA that they were not to compete in the same market. So MCA sued them and won. So Verizon then gave them its controlling shares of USA, which controlled both that channel and the Sci-Fi Channel. And MCA turned around and sold that to a guy named Bruce Diller. Diller brought on board Stephen Chow. The two had worked together at Fox while it was being started up by Murdoch, Chow taking over as president after Diller left, a position that Chow held for all of 10 weeks before he decided to pull this little stunt at a huge event featuring all these bigwigs, including future Vice President Dick Cheney and his wife. Chow thought it would be a great idea to illustrate his point by having a man stripped naked while standing beside Chow during a speech. It didn't go over very well. Rupert Murdoch fired his ass as soon as it was over. But Diller must have liked his moxie because even though they used to fight all the time when they were over at Fox, he actually brought Chow in to be president of USA. Chow began clearing the decks when he took over, first putting David Icke, the future producer of Battlestar Galactica, in charge of USA programming, and then told Barry Shulman at the Sci-Fi Channel to turn in his resignation too. And the reason all this is relevant is that Shulman was the #1 supporter of MST3K at the Sci-Fi Channel. It's not that other people hated it or anything, but it did tend to confuse them. And since the ratings had plateaued, naturally someone would want to be able to say, if asked, "What have you done about this?" that they had done something about it. They would tell Best Brains to make the show more edgy, but when asked what exactly that meant, the executives were grudgingly unable to define the buzzwords that they liked to throw around, so the show basically stayed the course. But with Shulman leaving, the future of the show would now be in question because holding steady just isn't good enough for some people. If there is an absence of growth, then something is wrong, these people think. Knowing this, one of Shulman's last acts before handing in his resignation was to officially renew the show for a 10th season as well, so there was at least a future there, even if it was a bit less certain than what they would have liked. For one thing, it would not include what was called the Back 9 that had been picked up for Season 8, a reference to an option for 9 additional episodes. As a result, for the first time since Season 2, Season 9 would have only 13 episodes.
Oh, sorry. Stop hitting me! Mike, no! It's Bro! Mike, stop! It's Bro!
Damn them. Despite all this, the show itself seemed to be getting stronger and stronger. There was now a merging of the old with the new as everyone returned to present-day Earth. The satellite obviously up in orbit still, of course. And Pearl and company found themselves in Forrester Castle, part of the long family tradition of wanting to take over the world. Pearl was now decked out in a kind of green master villain outfit, in keeping with her new desire for world domination, which the theme song had talked about throughout all of Season 8, but didn't really make many efforts in that general direction. Bobo and Brain Guy were still on hand, so while we had the new dynamic remaining, it was now couched in the familiar Deep 13 situation of a fixed location and plots and antics of the week. This meant that one week might be a Dr. Forrester-style plot to dominate mankind one person at a time, and the next to be Brain Guy having to cope with the return of the other observers, who are disgusted with what he has become. So as I said, it offered opportunities from both eras. There were also efforts to further push the envelope, such as the presence of none other than Leonard Maltin, who despite the abuse he received over Laser Blast, nevertheless joined Pearl in selecting a movie for Mike and the Bots. Also, the Screaming Skull gave us an attempt at special effects, with Brain Guy making Bobo tiny, a.k.a. having him stand on the other side of the room. Yes, the bar has been raised. We finally know now why Tom Bombadil did not appear in the Fellowship of the Ring. It's because, as we all know, no one on Earth could play that character except Kevin Murphy, and clearly Peter Jackson was so jealous of these miniaturization special effects that he refused to give him the part out of spite.
Hey!
Season 9 included more European fare, British films such as The Projected Man, The Deadly Bees, and kaiju film Gorgo. And there were Italian films like Devilfish and Puma Man as well. Plus, there were a significant number of fairly recent films. 1988's Hobgoblins, while not the worst film they've covered, certainly one of the worst to have to sit through. 1993's Quest of the Delta Knights, a camp sword and sorcery film that inexplicably stars David Warner in the role of good guy mentor and evil villain. No, they are not related. Plus, serving as the narrator, too. And the less than 2-year-old film Werewolf, the brainchild of a man referred to as, quote, the Persian Ed Wood.
Come on in, we're expecting you.
Why don't you head down to the crawl space? I'll be right there to kill you.
Season 9 also featured the return, in a limited form, of shorts. The first was fairly standard fare, Century 21 Calling, taken from the World's Fair to talk about phones. Nothing that would have been out of place during the Comedy Central era. The real surprise, though, was a 6-minute episode of the claymation show Gumby, Robot Rumpus, a fun diversion, especially with Servo and Crow identifying with the robots that have run amok, and the potential that claymation offers.
Son, I'll need a can of Play-Doh to replace my butt.
Season 9 is another tough one. Can you ignore the over-the-hill bit part that Joe Estevez, brother of Martin Sheen, offers up in Werewolf? Can you pass over the complete train wreck that is Hobgoblins? Can you possibly miss the historic presence of Pearl riffing in the theater in place of Mike in Quest of the Delta Knights? Can you afford not to see the inexplicable bowler hat guy ending in The Deadly Bees?
The guy from the Magritte paintings.
Yes, that was the entirety of his involvement in the film. However, even amongst giants, one still stands above the rest. We must salute the Canadian film The Final Sacrifice. This movie involves a cult that killed the father of the main character, a scrawny teenage boy obsessed with his father's murder. This is not helped by the fact that the man is the spitting image of NFL Hall of Fame legend Larry Zonka, making it look more and more like the kid has an unhealthy obsession with the guy. But the real story isn't the kid. It's of the, for lack of a better term, hero. An overweight, beer-drinking drifter whose truck is always on the verge of death, and best of all, is named Zap Rousedower. Rousedower is so unlikely a hero that, as Mary Jo herself commented, you expect him to be the guy who will become the sidekick of the actual hero, and seems to only take up that role by default.
I'm in no particular hurry. The Colts got their schedule, I got mine.
This was a student film project made on a budget of $1,500. That's Canadian dollars, remember, meaning adjusted for inflation. This film was made for about $1,900. To do a railroad tour of Colorado would cost you $250 more than that. And that's not for you and your loved one. Just you traveling around Colorado with only your legalized recreational marijuana for company. And somehow, they still managed to make a movie. Possibly because Rousedower is pretty much the only actual actor here. Bruce J. Mitchell, who suffered serious injuries during shooting, and to add insult to those actual injuries, the credits are screwed up and he's listed as having played the Canadian Wesley Crusher instead of the hero. And just when you think things can't get worse, Mr. Exposition arrives to explain what's going on, and he is simply an experience.
Cursed cult leader send you here to spy me? Know him? Get him up! Get him up! Splatter your brains all over this place.
No, as a matter of fact, we just escaped from him.
Who wants that there mark doing on your shoulder there?
It's a long story. McGregor, tell him I'm not...
McGregor? Troy McGregor?
It must hurt.
Thomas's son?
Sorry that clip ran long, but I could watch this guy all day.
I made you some trail mix out of rat droppings and hair.
Keep in mind that this was a year before the Red Green Show would launch, which featured the titular character putting on that exact same voice for comedic effect. I can't help but wonder because of this if there's just a significant number of Canadians who talk like this. A runner-up for this season is Puma Man, part of a trend during this time when Italian filmmakers were tapping into popular American films and genres, like the famous spaghetti westerns, or knockoff versions of Jaws and Dawn of the Dead. So Alberto De Martoni decided to combine Close Encounters of the Third Kind with Superman. Donald Pleasance was brought in to play the villain, adding a bit of name recognition to the picture. And the titular Puma Man was played by Walter George Alton, who took a break from his career as a lawyer to try to make some movies, this being the only one he did. The Puma Man learns of his powers from an Aztec, who is supposed to probably be mentor and sidekick, but as Mike and the Bots note, is really more of the actual hero of the film.
You've succeeded. They think you're dead, and now they will leave you alone.
To be left alone, the goal of every great hero.
Yeah.
Alton took the role because he thought he would be following in the career footprints of Clint Eastwood. It didn't quite work that way. The production was largely doomed because of conceptual problems and the fact the film is unintentionally camp. In fact, Alton had to insist on an overhaul to the costume, or would have been pink with slippers. What certainly didn't help matters was the fact that Alton didn't speak Italian. The director could only speak broken English, and the actor playing the Aztec was actually from Mexico, but consequently spoke no Italian and barely knew English. So I don't think that the director had much of a chance to really work with the actor to discover what this Aztec was. It was a challenge just to let them know that they had to do another take. Likewise, poor Donald Pleasance is left with practically nothing to do to flesh out his villainy, and so basically just turns into generic bad guy. I mean, if you wanted to believe that he escaped the helicopter crash at the end, then Puma Man could be considered a prequel to Warrior of the Lost World, and everything would actually make perfect sense.
Gentlemen, I'm so glad that you considered my house a suitable place for this summit meeting.
No, I wish you'd told me.
The real world is run by men of power.
Now, sell me this pencil.
They form a pretty seamless performance. Well, of course, there were concerns about what was going on behind the scenes at MST3K, and it would indeed lead to the end coming the following season, which we'll look at next time with Season 10.